I'm Mike Blume, and this is Lesson 11 in a discussion of end-time Bible prophecies. At this point, I wish to look in the Scriptures at Matthew chapter 24 again. The last two lessons were about this chapter, and we were discussing things that at face value look like they couldn't have been fulfilled in the first century. And at face value, that would be true. But we're realizing that Jesus used biblical imagery that the first century Hebrew people were very familiar with. They would have known exactly what Jesus was talking about, whereas people in our society, 2,000 years later, halfway around the world, wouldn't recognize. There are idioms and metaphors that every culture uses, that if another culture is not familiar with it, the people therein would not understand what the point was. For example, if you went over to a culture thousands of years ago and said, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, they wouldn't realize that if you've got some problems in your own life, you shouldn't talk about other people's problems when you told them people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But by the same token, there's biblical metaphors in the past that we're not familiar with today. And people are absolutely distorting and misconstruing the entire point that the New Testament was trying to teach us. And no wonder they've come out with prophecies and predictions that have failed and failed and failed again and again through the centuries. Because they're not keeping in mind to whom this was written, what metaphors those people were familiar with, and what they would have understood when Jesus said these words. Folks, Matthew 24 was fulfilled in the first century. In Matthew 24, it says also in verse 30, "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, they shall see the Son of Man coming in clouds of heaven with power and great glory." So there would be a sign that the Son of Man's in heaven. Now, would we see that? Would that be visible to us? Daniel chapter 7 says, in verse 13, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people and nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed." There he is. The Son of Man is coming to the Ancient of Days, to God the Father. And he's coming in clouds. And Matthew 24, Jesus says there's going to be a sign of the Son of Man in heaven. The Son of Man in heaven is the Son of Man who's gone to the throne. And what he prophesied was true because he's King of Kings now. He's gone to the throne. And a sign that he is in heaven as king is as follows. Jerusalem will be destroyed just as he predicted. It's talking about a sign that the Son of Man is in heaven. A sign of the Son of Man in heaven. He's in heaven now. And the sign that that's so, that he is king, and whatever he says is true, is Jerusalem being destroyed. Because he said it would occur. Now I also want to mention that in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 21 are words that prove that a lot of people's thoughts saying that, well, okay, let's say this was fulfilled in the first century, but there's going to be a double fulfillment. It'll be fulfilled a second time when Jesus comes in our future. I believe Jesus is coming in our future. I'm going to have some lessons solely on that issue. But Matthew 24 cannot be a double fulfillment. It cannot have occurred in the first century and then occur again in the future. Why? Because of the words of Matthew 24 and 21. "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." Now, how could something have a double fulfillment that's supposed to be worse than anything in the past and anything in the future? There you knocked out the double fulfillment right there when it says nothing in the future is going to be as bad either. It's a single fulfillment. And let me pause and say, for there to be great tribulation such as never was nor ever shall be, the punishment must fit the crime. What crime can be committed in our future that is worse than Israel taking their groom, adulterating against him with Rome, and putting him to death on the cross? What could be worse than taking the Lord of glory and crucifying him? Folks, to say that there's going to be great tribulation in our future that's worse than anything that ever happened before is to say that there's a crime going to happen in our future that is worse than anything before, including the cross. Nothing can be worse than the cross of Jesus Christ and the crime behind it. Yes, it saved us, it brought salvation, but it was the worst atrocity that could have occurred in human history. The punishment must fit the crime. All of the gloom and doom of the Bible is under the canopy of the immediate years of the cross. This view puts the cross of Jesus Christ in a focal position in contrast to all other views of prophecy? What witnesses with your spirit more? Making the cross central and focal to the whole viewpoint of prophecy? Or getting away from the cross, saying there's something worse going to happen in our future? Nothing worse can happen in our future than the cross of Jesus Christ. And folks, it was salvation to us, but it was an awful, awful thing for God's people to have to commit in order for us to be saved. God bless.